Good evening, folks, and welcome in. I'm Meteorologist Ross Mummah here. We got an 8 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center, so we want to give you the latest on the tropics. Of course, we're continuing to monitor three areas, really now about two areas. Hurricane Gabrielle still a Category 2 hurricane. It's headed towards the Azores and eventually towards Portugal and Spain. But as you can tell, I mean, that's pretty much in the north central Atlantic now. Gabrielle is no longer a concern for us. Now, we got Tropical Storm Humberto as of the 5 p.m. advisory. So Chief Meteorologist Lewis Turner, he broke that news on First Coast News at 5 o'clock. So you can see the current cone from Humberto there. We're going to delve into that a little bit further. But really, they only changed with the 8 p.m. update. Now a 40% chance of development for what is currently called Invest 94L, which is situated pretty much right over Puerto Rico currently, but still an 80% high chance of development over the next 7 days. So here's the latest infrared satellite imagery of both of those systems. So Humberto is to the right or the east, and then Invest 94L, pretty much just to the south of San Juan there, is at least where the strongest amount of thunderstorm and convection activity is currently taking place. This is just another way to look at it, water vapor satellite imagery. Both of these storms or tropical areas are expected to continue to strengthen, at least gradually here over the next couple of days. And of course, the tropical storm Humberto forecast cone shows that completely. So very slow strengthening and intensification through Thursday, through Friday. Then you'll notice, as we head into the weekend, likely getting at least a Category 1 hurricane, if not a Category 2 by the time we get to Sunday and perhaps into Monday. We certainly wouldn't be surprised if this reaches major category or major hurricane, status as a Cat 3 by the time we get into early next week, really just based off of how, Gabrielle strengthened rather quickly once it got up into the warmer ocean waters there. So that's something that we're going to monitor, really not going to impact what we experience from this. No direct impacts locally here on the First Coast or really anywhere up and down the United States eastern seaboard. So I want to stress, I said direct impacts from Humberto. Doesn't mean it may not influence Invest 94L with regards to whether that Invest develops further and forms into a tropical depression or tropical storm, but also it could also influence, where Invest 94L eventually tracks and where does it get steered toward. So these are just the latest kind of, forecast models and pretty much smack dab in line with what we saw from the forecast cone there from the National Hurricane Center. So it's going to continue on that northwesterly trajectory here through the weekend. Then as you get towards Monday and Tuesday, it's going to start to get influenced by the upper level flow pattern. There's going to be a stalled stationary front kind of along the eastern seaboard, and the jet stream essentially is going to start to pull it back more so to the north and then eventually bend it back to the northeast by the time we get into the middle to latter portions of next week. But I want to just stress, although we do have Tropical Storm Humberto, it is expected to become a hurricane by the upcoming weekend. We're not anticipating any local impacts specifically from that system. Now, different story when we're talking about Invest 94L. This is really the area that we are continuing to watch very, very closely here. Currently, as I had mentioned earlier, situated over Puerto Rico. That's going to make things a little bit more difficult for the forecast models to try to figure out, essentially, and dissect, so to speak. Once these tropical systems move over not only land masses, but land masses that have pretty decent terrain. I mean, Puerto Rico's got some mountains on it. Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic and Haiti, also quite mountainous in some of those areas. It can really break up some of these storms, and models have a hard time trying to figure out, okay, where is that center of low pressure actually going to end up forming? That can often, dictate where the storm eventually tracks after it moves over, the landmass. And you'll notice the forecast spaghetti model plots do show it moving right over the Dominican, perhaps over northern Haiti, before finally headed back out into the open ocean waters and kind of skirting its way through the Bahamas or perhaps just to the east of there. Now, we have had some good news today. Yesterday, the spaghetti models and the long-range forecast models were pretty much all over the place. There was large deviations within the models. Today, although there are still, plenty of deviations within them, and they are still quite divergent, it's a little bit more, in line today. There's a little bit more consensus that it does seem to at least show the potential for this system to move up into the Bahamas by Sunday, into Monday, and even then into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. But it is rare that you have two systems so close together. And you'll notice that here, just comparing the potential, forecast model tracks. Typically, you have one storm kind of overpower the other, so to speak. We've had some questions. Do they eventually just become one big storm? No, thankfully that's not the case here. But at times, they can almost begin to feed off of one another and begin to kind of rotate or orbit around each other. More often than not, one will become stronger than the other, and the weaker of the two systems can kind of get pulled into the tail end of the other one as the upper level jet stream kind of grabs a hold of it as it moves further northward latitude-wise and eventually moves it eastward. What that is called, if it does occur, is the Fujiwhara effect, and meteorologist Robert Speta has a great explainer here talking about what exactly the Fujiwhara effect is and how it relates specifically to what was Invest 93L, now Tropical Storm Humberto, and of course, Invest 94L. Take a listen.
Have you ever heard of this term, the Fujiwhara effect? It's an important meteorological term, especially when you're talking about two storms very close to each other, because what can happen is they sometimes can begin to orbit a common center, or maybe the bigger storm starts to eat up the smaller storm. This point is it makes the forecast extra difficult. Now, this is something that is not very common in the Atlantic, but common in the Western Pacific. And that's why back in the 1920s, a meteorologist by the name of Sakui Fujiwhara was the first person to kind of notice this specific phenomena. Now, here in the Atlantic, we do see it. Last time we saw it was back in 2023. And more than often, the big storm eats the smaller storm. Basically, it absorbs it up, or sometimes they can pinwheel around each other. And even in the most recent of instances with a couple tropical waves out here, they just make that forecast convoluted all over the place. And I think the point is, whenever you hear Fujiwhara effect, don't take it as a sign that you're going to have two storms combined and become a big, massive storm, but also a sign that the forecast can be unpredictable. So the important thing is to continue to check back in for the latest updates. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta.
Great explainer from Robert there to kind of talk about the Fujiwhara effect. Personally, for myself, I've never actually seen that here in the Atlantic Basin. Now, I have seen it out across the southern plains in an actual, thunderstorm, a mesocyclone. You can sometimes get two mesovortices or tornado circulations to be spinning around the same thunderstorm. So I've seen it in that regard, but certainly will be interesting to see if that does come to fruition here. Let's take a look at what the European and GFS models are showing. So both of them clearly showing, Tropical Storm Humberto not only forming, but, continuing to grow as you see those concentric circles almost due north of San Juan, Puerto Rico there. But you'll notice the European, is starting to show that Invest 94L beginning to strengthen as it moves over the Bahamas. GFS a little bit behind on that, I believe, as we advance it into Monday afternoon. There we go. Then the GFS starts to show the potential for something to form. What I do like to see about this is both of them, although, yes, slightly different, they do show fairly similar locations for both systems potentially, and strengths for both as well. So as of now, we are anticipating Tropical Storm Humberto to not only become a hurricane, but will likely stay stronger than what is currently Invest 94L. If it strengthens, it will become Tropical Storm Imelda. So Imelda is the next name on the list. But typically, as Robert mentioned, and as I had said before, one is more often than not stronger than the other, and that will almost act like gravity in a certain regard. That will start to pull the other storm or system with it if they don't end up rotating around each other. And that's kind of what some of our longer range models are showing. Now, let's talk about some of the local impacts we could see here. This is the European model just showing forecast winds at the surface. So surface level winds, that's Monday afternoon and evening. We advance it into Tuesday. Euro's perhaps a little bit slower, and we'll watch the timeline, but we're primarily looking between Sunday evening and Tuesday evening for potential impacts here. Most models, not only the European, but also the GFS, there's a couple, the Canadian, the German model, there's a lot of different longer range ones, right? Many of them are showing sustained winds along our coastal areas and pretty much from I-95 to the coast, sustained winds about 15 to 20 miles per hour. Gusts out at the beach is about 30. So for the time being, we're not anticipating a huge impact with regards to the wind. Similar to what we experienced with Hurricane Aaron previously this year, we are expecting, long period swells from perhaps both of these systems, creating some very high surf, rough surf, and that risk of rip currents as well as we head toward the end of the weekend and into early next week. So as of right now, we're primarily watching for those coastal impacts. Inland communities, especially west of I-95, as of right now, things are looking on the up and up. Now, I do want to stress, we're not to the point yet of locking the forecast in. And what I mean by that is everything is still on the table. Could there be some wobbles in the forecast that bring the storm closer to the eastern seaboard and then would potentially, greatly impact the first coast? Is that still a possibility? Yes, I would say it is a possibility. Is it likely? As of right now, I would say no. Again, I really do believe, when you're starting to get a decent amount of consensus from many of the different longer range models, although they all kind of have some different characteristics and show something a little bit different, the message within them all is rather similar. Humberto looks to be a little bit stronger, will more than likely have some level of an impact on what is now Invest 94L and would perhaps help to steer it a little bit further away from the United States and Florida, but also the first coast as well. Now, I kind of also want to mention some other things that are going on dynamically within the atmosphere. So let's start just to the north of where Humberto is currently shown there as of Sunday afternoon. Those wind barbs or those arrows, that's showing an upper level high just in the north or northeast of Humberto. Typically, tropical systems and a hurricane needs that upper level high stacked over a surface low to allow the storm to grow vertically and for it to ventilate itself, essentially. So that's kind of in the upper levels there. We look further to the west, right over the first coast in Jacksonville specifically. You can see those winds coming down out of the northwest. They pretty much make a V right over Jacksonville and then back up the eastern seaboard through the Carolinas and into the mid-Atlantic. That is that upper level trough that you may have seen some folks talking about online. There's going to be an upper level cutoff low, essentially, that's going to set up pretty much right over the Carolinas and northern Georgia. And those upper level winds in the trough going to dip down over Florida and then back up the eastern seaboard. Essentially, think of that upper level trough and those stronger winds as somewhat of a barrier, not allowing either of these two systems to come too far westward. Those steering winds going to be a little bit more so out of the south and perhaps even the southwest, impacting both of these storms as we look ahead into the early part of next week. And you can kind of see it here. Now, again, this is just European model data, but it shows those winds much more, again, out of the south or southwest, helping to steer both of those storms away from the first coast. This is another way to look at it. Yet again, we have those upper level winds, but also the wind shear as well. Decent amount of wind shear where that trough is going to be set up. And of course, hurricanes and tropical systems don't like wind shear or anything like that. So they're going to want to try to stay away from that as much as possible. But similarly, that was the European model. So just something to keep in mind. Let me go back to that quick. You can also see that upper level high just over kind of the north central Atlantic there, those clockwise winds. That's where it would be conducive for the storm to move into and for it to grow and to develop even further and to fuel itself off the warm ocean waters that I'll talk about here in a second, but also just dynamically in the atmosphere, it's much more favorable for tropical development. It's a much more hostile environment the further west that system tries to move. So long story short in me saying that is essentially, thank you, upper level trough, for hopefully keeping the system a little bit further east and away from the first coast, limiting our impacts here locally. And again, I do want to stress that is the forecast right now, but we are still a good ways out from this, system not only approaching us, but really the system hasn't even formed yet. It has not become a tropical depression, and I'm talking about Invest 94L, the one over Puerto Rico right now. It hasn't truly formed. We don't really have a forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center yet, and models really do struggle on both how it interacts with land masses and the high terrain, and also how does that impact, or how is that impacted or influenced by Tropical Storm Humberto. Models really don't have a great grasp on that yet. They are kind of showing similar things, but certainly still a long way to go in the confidence that we have in the forecast, so to speak. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the heat. I'm not anticipating rapid intensification, but the deep water ocean heat content, especially in the Bahamas, is quite high. So once Invest 94L, currently, just kind of more disorganized showers and thunderstorms, if it becomes to be, a little bit more organized and starts to move into the southern Bahamas and then a little bit closer to Nassau, or, really just the eastern Bahamas perhaps, there's going to be some very warm ocean waters, not only at the surface, but also deeper, down 10, 15, 20 meters. That's going to act as a lot of fuel. So although we're not anticipating, rapid intensification from a system, it will grow. And I think it'll just be something we'll have to keep a close eye on to see if a system begins to develop there and it's not too heavily impacted from Tropical Storm Humberto to the east. Does it, rapidly strengthen? I think that's another part of the puzzle that we'll kind of have to, monitor and watch closely here. Other part of this, of course, there's going to be a lot of tropical moisture with both of these systems. You can see both of them there highlighted in the bluish and purplish colors. Through Monday, it's still going to be swinging, onshore a lot of tropical-like air. But you'll notice just off to our west, just west of I-75, there's a lot of dry air, not only at the surface, but also typically in the upper levels of the atmosphere as well. Some of that could get pulled down to the surface, and by the time both of these systems perhaps begin to move away by Tuesday and Wednesday, we could have a decent amount of drier air wrapped in around on the backside, and we really might not get much of any rain or thunderstorm activity from the storm system itself. So just kind of another part that we're going to have to, watch. Forecast is going to be rather fluid here over the next couple of days. So there's going to be some tweaks, some changes, but some just key notes, some headlines here to take away as you kind of look ahead to the back half of the work week here and toward the weekend. Just stay alert, check back in for more updates. Coastal impacts currently look the most likely between Sunday and Tuesday of next week. Probably more so Monday and Tuesday. We'll watch Sunday night, but really I'm feeling pretty confident about Monday and Tuesday timing-wise. So when can we see coastal impacts? That would be the point. Rough surf, breezy conditions, quite possible. I mentioned sustained winds about 15 to 20, gusts upwards of about 30 miles per hour there out at our area beaches. If the track shifts a little bit further westward and closer to the coast, then of course our, conditions will be worse and will deteriorate a little bit further. But based off of what a lot of the different models are showing, of course, we're trying to just look at them and analyze them to see, okay, what are we thinking using our own meteorological knowledge? Based off of what we're seeing and analyzing it, it does seem like it is going to stay offshore. So, worst case scenario, I think, we get a lot of beach erosion and some, pretty bad coastal conditions, but inland locations really might not be all that bad, might not get all that much rainfall either. But really the biggest question in the forecast is, how does Tropical Storm Humberto really influence Invest 94L, and does it put along with it further off to the east? So that's the question we are going to be tirelessly trying to answer here for you over the next couple of days. That's pretty much all I've got with the 8 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. Of course, I'll have another update at 11 p.m. So hopefully you can tune in to First Coast News at 11. And of course, the First Coast News Most Accurate Weather Team is going to have plenty of updates here for you through the end of the week. Now, I do want to send it back over to meteorologist Robert Spetta because today, or really this week, is the anniversary of Hurricane Helene. I know it's hard to believe it's been just 12 months already since Hurricane Helene made landfall in Florida's Big Bend, ravaged portions of northern Ware County and the Waycross area, toppling trees, just countless power outages. And Robert, he's going to take a look back at what it looked like and felt like during Helene's landfall last year.
Hurricane Helene. It's been a year since this major storm made landfall in Florida and then went on to become the deadliest hurricane in the United States since Katrina in 2005. 252 lives were lost from this storm, with $79 billion in damages. Despite the storm passing east of Jacksonville, it still brought a swath of damage to the First Coast. Hurricane-strength winds were seen across the Big Bend area, stretching north past Live Oak, Lake City, and into Waycross. Now, Helene first developed on the 22nd of September, but it was not until the 25th and 26th, just prior to landfall, when it rapidly intensified to a Category 4 storm on track for a landfall along the Big Bend area. The storm made landfall near Perry, Florida. These images, actually just south of Perry, show a whole wide swath of trees flattened due to those hurricane-strength winds. The right front quadrant just prior to landfall also pushed in a record-breaking storm surge for Tampa and the surrounding areas near St. The eye wall of this storm then raced towards the north, passing through Live Oak, where some historic buildings were damaged. And widespread downed trees were also reported near Lake City and eventually into Waycross. As far as the First Coast, Waycross was one of the hardest hit areas. Hundreds of trees were down throughout this city and all of Ware County for that matter. Almost the entire town lost power, and in some cases, it would be weeks for it to be totally restored. The storm's recovery there was slow, with schools being closed for nearly a month after Hurricane Helene. And after racing past the First Coast, Helene was far from over. As it moved over the mountains of the Carolinas, it dropped a staggering amount of rainfall. Some areas received 30 inches of rain, causing catastrophic flooding. Over 100 fatalities were reported in the Carolinas, where some towns were completely destroyed. Hurricane Helene was officially retired by the World Meteorological Agency due to its extensive destruction and loss of life. And now we look back on this storm 1 year later. I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta, First Coast News, on your side.
East, the furthest away storm from the First Coast, that is expected to turn northwestward and then eventually northward up toward Bermuda and away from the First Coast. Invest 94L is currently situated right around Puerto Rico, currently bringing them some gusty conditions and heavy rainfall. It does have a high chance of tropical development over the next 7 days. So we're going to continue to monitor this storm closely as it moves its way into the Bahamas over the weekend, and then potentially by Sunday and Monday of early next week, we could have a tropical depression, if not a tropical storm, forming just off the east coast of Florida. Of course, a lot can change with that tract and the impacts, but as of right now, at least at the very least, expect rough surf, rip current concerns, and breezy to, if not windy conditions, especially along our coastal areas, potentially as early as Sunday evening, but more than likely for next Monday and next Tuesday of next week. But of course, we're going to urge you to continue to check back in here on First Coast News, First Coast News Plus, for the latest information on the tropics. I'm First Coast News meteorologist Ross Mummah, on your side.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Lee Southwick. You're watching the First Coast News Weather Channel. We are proud to have been named the most accurate weather team in Jacksonville for the 5th year in a row by Weather Rate. We take our forecasting very seriously, and we want to get every detail right and accurate. We know weather impacts your day, whether it's going to work, going to school, running errands, going to the beach, or out on the water. You need to know what time that rain is going to arrive, how hot it's going to be, if fog is going to impact you, or if it's windy. And we want to nail it every day for you. We promise to keep working hard to stay the most accurate when it comes to forecasting for the First Coast.
You're looking for answers. You need to understand the facts. You want the truth.
The First Coast is my home. I grew up here and I worked really hard to get back here.
Because I want you to be ready for what's coming.
You got to make sure you're exactly on point with your forecast.
Being part of the most accurate weather team, we can give you that trust, helping you stay safe.
You earn someone's trust by showing up every day for them.
Why does it matter in a forecast? Trust isn't everything, it's the only thing.
Consistency with, the accuracy in your forecast.
You're planning your day around it. You're planning your life around the weather forecast.
Every storm.
Every forecast.
We are earning your trust.
Rely on the team working every day to earn your trust. First Coast News on your side.